We're EarthForce. We are a national nonprofit and the home of environmental action civics. In field chats, you'll hear research-based, actionable tips and inspiring stories of youth-adult partnerships that empower young people to become environmental decision makers. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Field Chats, Environmental Action Civics Essentials, brought to you by EarthForce. Today, we have a guest on the show, someone who we've gotten to know pretty well and we've worked with over the past year, digging into not just our evaluation of our programs, but into some really juicy questions about evaluation as a whole and what it means in the environmental field. We're joined by Evan Kuras from Data+Soul. I'm Kristen, I'm Program Manager with EarthForce, and I'm joined by SJ, Taylor, and of course, Evan. Hello, folks. So, for a little welcome today, I'm going to pull us through Venture Vibe, which is one of my favorite ways to say hi. Venture Vibe is exactly what it sounds like. Introduce yourself real briefly, and Evan, you can talk a little bit more about who you are and what Data+Soul is when we really get into the conversation. But Venture Vibe is if there's a cool thing that you're vibing about, good news that you want to share, or event, something that's bothering you that you got to get. I'll start with a vibe. I'm vibing on having some friends over for dinner later. I'm about to cook a huge lasagna and share it with all of my friends, and I'm really looking forward to that. So vibing on lasagna right now.
I like it. Lasagna is delicious. Not too much sauce. That's always my But hi, y'all. I'm Taylor, fellow program manager here at EarthForce, and I would say I'm vibing. Yeah, vibing. Looking forward to the holiday. But then there's also a lot of really great work happening here in Colorado, where I'm based out of, with action and all those certain things, especially around student-led action. So the new year is going to be pretty excited.
That's awesome. Also, I love a lot of sauce in my lasagna. So, gosh, vibing. I was in Puerto Rico last week, so I am definitely I was able to experience so many different biomes, and I'm feel like I'm just always vibing with nature, but I just feel extra connected and just curious about a lot of different things right now. So just still getting outside in this cold weather now that I'm back, and looking forward to have a solstice kind of camp out happening this weekend. So happy almost solstice, everyone. How about you, Evan?
Hey y'all, I'm Evan Kuras, and I'm an evaluation consultant with Data+Soul Research, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. But I live in Massachusetts in the US, and it is cold here. Not today, it's like in the 50s, but it is typically cold here, and many New Englanders have a wood guy who brings them wood if they don't have the ability to produce it themselves. And so today, a wood guy came and just dumped a bunch of firewood in my driveway in urban Somerville, Massachusetts. Not so urban that I actually do have a driveway, but too urban for me to have trees for my own firewood. And so it's just sitting there in a pile on my driveway, and I'm very looking forward to that being my workout for today, to transfer all the firewood into our firewood holder. But right now there's just a big pile of firewood in the driveway in residential part of Somerville. So I think it's pretty funny. And I'm very delighted to be able to start making fires in our fireplace soon. So that's my vibe.
Heck yeah, thanks, wood guy. That rocks, Evan. I didn't know that. So yeah, Evan, we're really we're jazzed to have you. We have had really juicy conversations with you in the past, and I am excited to record one and be able to share it with folks out there. So Evan, the way that we first met you really and got in contact with you as a team was after EarthForce had initially created our community of practice on the Mighty Network, which a lot of people will be familiar with. After we had started up our community of practice really intentionally to kind of decenter EarthForce as the sole purveyor of knowledge and environmental action civics, and really have a space where folks could come together and share knowledge peer-to-peer. After we had created our community of practice, we were really interested in evaluating that from a network perspective, evaluating the network as a network. And then we brought you on to help us go through that process. And we went through several weeks of time with you. So I'm wondering, Evan, could you introduce yourself a little bit about who you are, what Data+Soul is, and then talk about that process that you walked us through?
Sure. So I'm an evaluation consultant, and so our firm provides evaluation services to organizations like nonprofits, governments, foundations, to help them learn and make decisions and understand their impact. And there's a lot in there about power and accountability, and about who decides what counts and what matters, and what ultimately, like, what shapes the decisions that we do and how we communicate them. And so there's a lot of really juicy things there that we get to think about all the time. Our firm is based in Massachusetts, but we work nationally, and also within our region, New England. And we do projects in the environmental space, but also beyond it. And so I like that I get to bring learnings from other fields to the work I do with environmental organizations like with Earth Force. So that's what our firm does. And I think the Data+Soul part is important. We actually just changed our name this year to be Data+Soul. That had been our kind of motto. We really wanted to lean into it. And when people think about evaluation, they usually just think about the data part. How do we get data from surveys, and how do we, what numbers do we have about our impact and what we're doing? But the soul part is just, or maybe even more important, which is about the humanity, and ultimately the people that are part of programs or that programs serve. And so one of the processes that we did together is something that we call our Story Plus Data Map. But really it's about trying to tell the story of the people who are part of your programs, and what are their aspirations, and how is your program supporting them. And when you think about it in terms of the person who is trying to make a change in their community, the young person making a change in the community, or maybe the educator who's supporting a young person, it shifts the way you think about evaluation and learning to be less about what is our program doing, and more about what is our protagonist, what is this young person doing? How are we supporting them? How do we know they're closer to their goals and their dreams? What's getting in their way that we need to understand so we can better support them? And then how can we tell that story to uplift their work that they're doing, and to understand what resources we need to support them better, what shifts we need to do, because we're accountable to them. And so that's the process we used. And I think that we've seen that shift really be useful for organizations to think less about what am I doing and more about how am I supporting the people that I serve.
Yeah, I was really excited when we got to go through that process, because I am definitely of that ilk of the soul part. I'm more oriented to partnerships and understanding people and where they're at and what they want and need. And so when we had this conversation, I was really jazzed about kind of making it tangible, because I think sometimes those concepts can be a little bit out there, and our work intersects at so many different places too. So it's the complexity of what we do as an Earth Force organization, but then our impact in general can look so many different ways. And so when you have that protagonist and story analogy, I was really excited. And then Kristen, you had something that you might wanted to say.
Yeah, similar to the path, as it were, from data to Data+Soul. We had really been thinking about our community of practice as just a network of, like, what are the connections between people, like how is that working, to then including the story of people who are in there. And so as we were going through this process with you, Evan, we made a few of those, like, mental pivots, from, at least I did, in thinking about the community of practice as, a bunch of points and lines to a bunch of stories that are interconnecting, and how are each person's story impacting a different person's story. And SJ, this makes me think of ripple effect mapping, which we've gotten into a lot more recently.
Yeah. I think similar to what Taylor was saying too, because Taylor and I work mostly with educators, and so it's like helping, instead of extracting the data, right? Like that is like one side of things, but our work together with you, Evan, really, I feel like it empowered me to like do the type of data collection that like resonated most with me too, which is that qualitative piece. And often there isn't as much qualitative data in the environmental ed field, and in general, right, we try to put numbers behind things with surveys. And so something that really stuck with me that you had said was, how can we approach our protagonists? And I love that you also gave us like really great vocabulary. So how can we work with our protagonists to help them co-create and co-evaluate this work with them? And that co-evaluation piece, I think I bring up that word in like every program team meeting. And we're still like unlearning, relearning like what that actually looks like. So in one of the ways that has resonated with me, and again, like what we've been saying is like a structure for this, is called ripple effect mapping. And there's protocols on this that were introduced to us with Data+Soul. And Evan, we had one of your colleagues on who like was showing us how she artistically actually like showcases that, which is amazing. If you have an artistic person on your team, I think that's a great combination to synthesize things. And that starts with appreciative inquiry. So that is like, I'm on this learning curve with ripple effect mapping, that I'm like kind of sitting in this appreciative inquiry space and really sitting with like inviting the educators that I work with to highlight what they're doing well, to share things they're really proud of in like a compassionate way. And I recently just worked with an educator in collecting all of the emails and the phone calls, et cetera, back and forth, and was like, here's the process that you and I have been through to facilitate kicking off the environmental action civics process, and like captured that story, shared it with her. She was like, oh, I don't want you to put in those words. I want you to put in these words. So we co-created this story together of like the way to kick off facilitating environmental action, which can be really messy and like chaotic. And so so that's all to say that this work with you all has really landed in me feeling empowered to capture the story of the protagonist in a way that is beneficial to them first and foremost, and really centering what their aspirations are in this ecosystem of environmental action civics, which is our community of practice. So it kind of dovetailed with our network learning that we had been doing at the same time.
Yeah, I think it can be a real gift to be invited to share your experience, and for that to be really valued. And I'm thinking about, whenever you're listening to this podcast, know that it's like December 2024, and so it's holiday season, and this is a time when people send cards to each other to celebrate milestones, to share gratitude and appreciation. If you're a program staff, maybe you've received cards from your participants or parents saying like, hey, thanks, and this is what it's meant to me. And maybe it's come with, some chocolates or a Dunkin' gift card, or maybe you sent one with a picture of a child in your life, or a new car or bike or something. And it's a gift to be able to write those cards and to share your gratitude and to share your reflections, and it's a gift to receive them. And where the evaluation comes in is that Esther, you shared what it was like to kind of look at this all together with an educator and see the process to make this work visible, and to be and then say, what is this? What can we make of this? How can we tell the story together? And imagine taking cards that you've received from people who've seen the work that you've been doing, and looking at it together and say, what can we learn from these cards we received? And that's not a survey, right? But there's something that's worth learning from there, and to really think like, how can feedback be a gift in a way that writing a card is a gift, and it can be just as meaningful for the giver as it is for the receiver. And that's how we like to try to think about data and learning. And like, what are the ways that this can feel really meaningful? Because it is meaningful and not extractive, but rather, a gift. So I love hearing that in your story, SJ. And for anyone listening, I encourage you to think about what conversations and activities do feel like a gift, do feel really meaningful, that might already be happening in your work, that you can, just kind of look at all together in order to learn from it.
Yeah, there's data everywhere where we look. And SJ hit on this kind of middle point that we wanted to talk about, which was evaluation more generally in the environmental education and civic space, things that are exciting or challenging that we've seen in the field, and equity is certainly one of those. So I'll just kind of open it up for everyone. Any particular things that are exciting or challenging that we've seen around this theme of evaluation in EE and civics?
I was just going to say, one of those cards from the data equity deck I don't know if I pulled it or one of my colleagues pulled it as we were going through our work, but it was like, whose data is this reflecting, and who's being left out of these conversations? And it really did give me pause. And so in my case, like, for example, for educators who like weren't responding to me and like who weren't doing environmental action civics, how can I still collect data from them on like their barriers and like why they weren't able to participate in a way that doesn't feel like they're in trouble, or you know what I mean? But still doing, like, having a focus on who are we not reaching, and trying to just learn from them about where they're at, without like pressuring them to like join us if they're not ready. But just thinking about of course, the demographics. I think that's something a lot of people think about as demographics, and a lot of folks are having to focus on working in environmental justice communities with J40, but it's that's one thing, and then it's totally separate on like the approach to collecting data, right? And so that it's not extractive, and that it is collaborative, and like what you said was so beautiful, Evan, with it really being approached as a gift from the receiver and the giver. We just don't think about data like that at all, and it really it's made me love evaluation. Like I've like totally changed a lot of my thoughts on truly, like I'm saying this, like I really love like thinking about evaluation now, and talking about it with people, and opening up their hearts, their souls to thinking about it in an equitable way.
Yeah, so SJ is talking about our data equity deck.
I got one too.
There's a better view of it, but these are reflection cards that our team uses and that we work with our partners to ask questions like the ones that you posed. I think that the way that we go about our lives as humans is one where we really do care about each other, and we think about all these questions of like, well, what does it mean for me to send a card, and how to be in right relation. These are just human questions, and then we sometimes like turn that switch off. We're like, okay, evaluation, like doop, let's do a survey. And so the cards, and I think what our team tries to do is really help us bring back to those really human ways of doing the work. And so we pull cards, and they keep us accountable to these things that we actually are natural for us to think about. So I just pulled a card that says, how could your identities impact the data collection experience for a participant? And like, of course, we think about that all the time when we're just living our life, right? Like, who am I? What is it like for me to show up in this place? But then for you to just ask, okay, what is it like for me to be the one on the phone? And just to think that through can make a huge difference in terms of equity, in terms of power, in terms of people's comfort, and willingness to participate and what they're getting out of it. So thanks for bringing that up, SJ. And I guess the reminder for anybody here is, even without this deck of cards, which you can get from Data+Soul.com, just like be a human, and you'll find that what feels right is maybe the right way to do it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Oh, Kristen, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the themes that SJ and Evan were talking about reminded me of a lot of the conversations that were brought up in the EEVAL online course last year, which is where I met Evan in the first place. And in the course, we talk a lot about that idea of data gathering not being extractive from the people, the humans that you're working with, and how that, like, co-creation of an evaluation that is not only meaningful for you and your, organization and your program and your grants, but it's also meaningful for your participants and the people that you're serving, that you're working with, that you're co-creating with. That corner of equity is really important in the work that we're doing, and that has come out through our conversation as well. Yeah, Taylor, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say, a lot of times evaluation, at least for me, is always after the fact, but these conversations have really helped infuse programmatic elements where you are engaging with people throughout the program and keeping those pieces in mind, similar to the card that you picked, Evan. Kind of, how does your identity shape how you show up in that space? And so for a lot of the class visits or engagement with the educator, really trying to decenter myself and raise them up more in the process has been really helpful to enrich the entire experience, because the collective action or the change that they're seeking to change is within their community. And so it's not about me and my ability, it's more about me supporting the ability of those folks. So yeah, that service community. And I really appreciate Evan bringing that to the forefront when we talk about our evaluation. It's like, oh, what is important? How are we going to measure some of these more tricky human-centered pieces? And that kind of elevation of those folks has been really great.
Yeah, and we measure so many human-centered things, like someone's aspirations or educator joy, or these ripples through communities and through stories. And, like, for me initially, I was like, oh, how do you measure that? Like, how do you measure educator joy? But when you're going about it in a human-centered way to gather human-centered information and data, it just makes a whole lot more sense, and it feels a lot more intuitive as you're going through it.
It makes me think of, like, how can you not measure? Like, how could you not know if you...
Right.
Like, we're just, it's eye-opening. So thank you, guys. Evan, any last comments before we wrap up today? I know we'll put some of the resources that we mentioned in our show notes.
Last comments. I just wish this were another hour longer, because more about what you're doing, and to be thinking about, concrete ways that we can, other educators can be bringing these themes into their work. So I don't know, a last nugget would be that this is a shift from the way that many of us learn about evaluation or expect to do it. It's a shift from the way often our funders expect us to evaluate.
Great point.
And so shifts take work, and it might not be easy to say, why are we asking these questions, and could we ask different questions, and maybe even talk to funders and to say, why do we have to report these things? What would it be like if we reported this instead? Or what would it be like for you to come to an ending celebration instead of a report? So you could see for yourself the impact that your funds have facilitated. So it isn't the way the field is, but it's where a lot of the field is heading. And I'm grateful that there's a lot of energy and action toward that. And you'll see some of those resources to help you be part of that journey too, for those that like to shift the way you think about evaluation or your organization does in the future.
Awesome. Evan, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us again. We always love talking to you. Lots of juicy questions and juicy conversations to be had. If you're curious to learn more about Data+Soul, the Data Equity Deck, eEval, or any other resources that we mentioned, we'll put those in the show notes. And as always, let us know what you think at earthforce.org/podcast. And don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this podcast. And we will see you next time.